the whole of the meeting and taking up the space on the website. So if you could agree to pass the resolution excluding the representatives of the press and public from this meeting, I'd be very grateful. Just nods or silence as assent would be good. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. The meeting will be recorded and the recording will be published on the Trust website afterwards. So as ever, I'd just like you to bear that in mind if we were to get close to naming a particular patient or discussing a particular case in any circumstances. So, Richard, apologies.
Thanks, Alan. So from Governors Gail Chapman and Srijit Nair, and also Jane Chambers will be joining the meeting around half an hour late. Thanks.
And I did see a note from Alice saying that she would have to leave a little bit early for a second appointment. Anybody else? No. Good, thank you. Any declarations of interest? No. Well, is that a hand up there? No. Any like welcome to Leanne, who's here for Debbie Needham, our newly appointed hospital CEO, who's on 2 well-earned weeks of leave, and not that she's going anywhere, of course, and will be starting with us on the 15th of March, and I'm sure you'll all get a chance to meet Debbie in virtually, at least, in various ways. I have a declaration of interest, obviously, for item 7, and Trevor will take over at that point. So, minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of February. Are you happy that there are a fair record of the meeting? Don't see anything else? Okay, thank you very much. And the actions are all complete, as you can see from the action list and the green marks against them. So unless anybody has anything for that, no, good, thank you. Chairman Executive Team updates. We'll come to anything I have to say at the end of this, because Leanne and I haven't had a chance to discuss what Leanne's talking about. So I will pick up anything that comes from me at the end. Leanne, over to you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. And as Alan said, I'm stepping in for Debbie at the moment. And I know, speaking to Peter, there was a couple of requests from the governors in terms of appointments to the organisation, which I can talk about, and Alan can obviously support and help with that. So in terms of a group point of view, there was a question raised as to when Simon will be back with us, and that's towards the end of March. We've appointed our Chief Financial Officer, who starts in June. His name is John Evans. And obviously, we've got Mark in post now and Andy Callow in terms of the roles at group level. There's further advert out for the group comms person, and interviews are towards the end of March for that. And we've also, so that's from a group point of view. From a hospital point of view, obviously Debbie starts with us on the 15th of March as our new hospital chief executive. We have appointed heads of hospital communications, and one will start at KGH and one NGH in April. And then we've out to advert for the hospital digital lead and obviously the hospital HR human resources lead, and the appointments will be made in April. Just more locally to that, within our exec team, Joe Forcus has moved over to NGH along with Eileen, and we have Faye Gordon, who was the Deputy Chief Operating Officer, acting into that place now, and obviously we'll go through some further appointments to support her in her new role. So that's that from a kind of where are we at with individuals. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to other bits and pieces? No? Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea about where we're at. There's lots of changes afoot, but we're working very closely with NGH and are meeting quite regularly in order to make sure we all keep our eye on what we need to focus on. The other bits that were really Peter and I talked about was where are we as a hospital with COVID at the moment, and what's the state of the hospital? So in relation to COVID, we have seen a reduction in the number of patients with COVID in the organisation. However, we are seeing a younger group of people that are in our intensive care unit. So I think it's really positive in that the vaccinations are working really well for our older population. But that 50-year-old group obviously do need to be vaccinated as soon as possible. And I appreciate there's a rollout programme for that nationally. So whilst we are seeing a reduction in the number of patients with COVID, it's remaining static. So at any one time in the organisation, we have 45 to 50 positive patients, and we have about 30 recovered from COVID. And that's not really shifted very much in the last couple of weeks. What we have noticed is that we are seeing an increase in number of attendances to A&E and increasing admissions with patients with high acuity relating to other illnesses. And I'm assuming, and we haven't looked at this yet, that this could well be related to people that have sat on conditions for quite some time and are now obviously needing to seek our support. So from a community point of view, we really need to be encouraging people to come early. I think we are seeing, unfortunately, a consequence of that. So that does mean that the organisation is still under quite a significant pressure in terms of its bed capacity, and particularly when you're trying to manage COVID pathways and non-COVID pathways, and of course getting back to elective activity and making sure that we are addressing the needs of patients that need, for example, hip replacements, etc. So we are still kind of compromised from that point of view. So it feels like we're actually in a normal winter at the moment. So in relation to additional pressures, I guess, in relation to that is staffing. So staffing, and I know we spoke to you about this last time, and Joe Dilly did present to you our kind of trigger tool about staffing. Staffing does still remain a challenge. We do still have over 300 staff off at any one time. That has come down from 450, so that's positive. But we are still having a number of people self-isolating, and we have recently received further guidance from government regarding clinically extremely vulnerable staff, which does mean, of course, other people have now got letters to shield. So we're looking at what that actually means from a numbers point of view. And then in terms of impact on safety and quality in relation to that, I think, as we spoke last time, falls remains our area of focus in the organisation, and we're doing a lot of work around that as we speak and constantly, and we will have a summit, our own summit mid-March regarding that. So that's it really from a COVID hospital point of view. If anybody wants to ask me any questions before I move on. Is that all quite clear? Mabel?
Could I ask you if you've got many patients with long COVID?
So we will be seeing patients with long COVID. It's difficult to say from a quantum point of view how many patients in the organisation now have it, because we tend to be dealing with the acute phase, but we are trying to gear up to dealing with long COVID going forward. So we do imagine there'll be a number of patients that will be left with long-term lung conditions and respiratory concerns. So we are thinking about how we manage that. Certainly through COVID, we've actually set up a virtual respiratory ward, which is excellent. We've got about 40 patients that are being cared for out in the community. So that's been a really positive thing. But there is and I think long COVID, in terms of its, I guess, the use of that term, it is probably quite broad. And there's actually a really defined list of conditions that make long COVID. I think when people are struggling to recover because they're still a bit breathless, etc., it's being deemed as long COVID, and it isn't. So I think we just need to be really mindful, but we don't have the data to say at this moment in time how many patients have got long COVID or how many staff have got long COVID.
Thank you.
Richard.
Just thanks, Leanne, for that explanation. I'm just wondering if the governors would find it helpful if, given that members of the public will want to understand that nuance between what's recovering from COVID and what's diagnosable long COVID, would it be helpful if Raja Reddy or another respiratory consultant came along and talked us through what those list of symptoms would be? How do you diagnose long COVID? What does it look like? Not seeing a couple of nods from governors, would that be useful?
Yes, please. Yes, absolutely.
Andrew could do that actually, Richard, as well, because he's been talking a lot about that.
Thank you.
Mabel.
I think it's a really interesting situation. There are increasing definitions. There's a lot on social media about long COVID. I believe there are about 40 long COVID clinics being set up in the country. There's none in Northamptonshire, obviously, but I think it would be, because there's an increasing worry among the public about it, and everything's being almost termed as long COVID, to have some further discussion of it. One of the key symptoms that people are coming to me with is fatigue, and it's very, very difficult to differentiate whether it's long COVID or just lockdown getting people down.
That's very true, Mabel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd entirely agree with that, Mabel. The trouble is that long COVID has such a plethora of symptoms,
Yeah.
very wide variety. Is it the same as chronic fatigue syndrome?
Yeah.
Are there psychological overlays? Of course, some people are concerned that people are just, quote, trying it on, which of course I'm sure isn't true. And there's no doubt that long COVID is a very definite entity, and we're going to pay a high price for it, particularly at the moment. Apart from graded recovery, counselling and support, there isn't really any sign of a cure. Thank you.
I have dealt with a lot of cases of post-viral fatigue syndrome, and COVID is one of these viruses that can cause that. So we really need to discuss it with our CHESS team to find out ways of discriminating between the two conditions, because the management is completely different. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. We'll arrange Andrew or Raja to come and do something. Can I just say, I can only see 9 images on the screen. So if anybody is wanting to say something, if you could use the hands up feature, which if you don't know about it on this is top right of the screen, there's a little image of a hand, 3 in. And if you click on that, it will give you the opportunity to raise your hands, because I can only see certain people waving. I can't.
Waving.
Okay, Leanne, on you go.
Thank you. So the other thing that we talked about was Ockenden review, and I'm not quite sure how much councillor governors will know about this. So I thought it'd just be good to give a brief overview. So the Ockenden review is of maternity services. It's this lady called Donna Ockenden, who led an inquiry into Shrewsbury and Telford Hospitals NHS Trust in relation to a number, I think she's looked at 250 cases so far of issues in relation to maternity services and experiences of families. And I think there's a further 800 cases that they're looking at currently. Given the breadth and depth of the concerns, in December, there was an interim publication that talked about the things that maternity services and acute organisations needed to focus on. So in December, we received a letter from NHSE, which set out 12 urgent clinical priorities and recommendations, as all trusts did. And we have worked through that, and we've been reporting through the Quality and Safety Committee in terms of the actions that we've taken. Thankfully, I'm really pleased to report that there's only a couple of areas that we needed to focus on. And for example, that might just be making sure there's 2 consultant rounds a weekend as opposed to 1 virtual and 1 face-to-face. So we're in a really strong position as an organisation in relation to the recommendations. But just to give assurance, I am the maternity safety champion for the organisation. I'm supported by Lisa Llewellyn as a non-exec director. We meet monthly with the maternity team, and I do monthly walkabouts as well to hear from staff directly of any concerns they may have. And I think we are in a very strong position, but we have very robust reporting mechanisms in place in the organisation to identify if there are any gaps, and obviously we will address those. So Ockenden, I think we have not heard the last. I think there will be further recommendations based on that, and there are a couple of other organisations in the country that are facing similar sort of inquiries. So I think maternity services have been under very, very close scrutiny for probably about the last 5 or 6 years, with a number of safety campaigns, etc. But they are so diverse and so many, it made it really difficult for some organisations to really cohesively manage all of that. What Ockenden's trying to do is bring that into a central point of focus so that everything goes through one kind of governance route, which is really, really helpful. Fundamentally in Ockenden, the bit that really stands out is the culture. So if you've got teams that are not communicating effectively, that's where a lot of these issues have arisen from. So yes, there are some functional and transactional aspects of practice to manage. A lot of it is about culture. And I'm pleased to say that I've had a conversation with the Health Service Investigation Bureau today, who look at all the cases that we refer of any neonatal or perinatal deaths, for example. And they find that Kettering General is hugely engaged, open, transparent, and they don't have any issues with us. So I'm really pleased to report that from a cultural point of view. Everybody can look at the report. It is available nationally, and it's quite an easy read at this moment because it's an interim report. So I would encourage you to look at that and come back with any other questions, but happy to take anything now on Ockenden. No? Okay, hopefully everybody knew about that. And then just finally from me, I think it's just worth saying that the Care Quality Commission have changed their inspections regime, which I'm sure you'll all know, in that they are obviously not doing boots on the ground inspections currently, and that for the foreseeable future, that's not likely to happen. But however, as an organisation, we are still quite rightly under regulatory scrutiny from the Care Quality Commission, and we have regular interviews and send evidence to them as we go through. So they are due to publish a new strategy in May 2021, and that will be developed and start probably from the summer. But at this moment in time, as I said, we are undergoing continuous conversations with them, and interestingly today we have a deep dive session with them regarding our emergency services, and next week Richard, myself and Faye Gordon have an interview with them regarding our management, so it's looking at well-led focus of COVID, so that'll be an interview that we'll have with them, and we're happy to feedback as we go through this process, but until we get their new kind of regime and strategy, it's a bit difficult to say exactly where they're going to go in the future. That doesn't mean to say that if they don't identify risks, they won't turn up, because they absolutely will, quite rightly, but it's a much more targeted inspection approach now. Again, happy to take any questions on that, and I'm sure Richard would be too.
Okay, I don't see anything, Leanne. I just got a couple of things to pick up on, really. One.
Oh, there's a hand up, Peter.
Oh, yes. Okay, Peter.
It's just not so much a question, more of a bit of information, and that is that the CQC have a newsletter which you can subscribe to if people want to get more regular updates on what they're doing. It isn't obviously focused on Kettering, it is a more general one, but it's a useful document just to read, just to keep you in the loop, as it were. So just go onto their website, subscribe to the newsletter, and it comes to you on a regular basis.
Thank you, Peter. And actually, just one more thing to add on that. Historically, of course, the CQC would have spoken to governors and have spoken to non-exec directors in relation to any inspection. At the moment, that's not something they seem to be doing overtly, but as that emerges, we'll definitely obviously engage with you in order to prepare for any of those subsequent interviews that are coming up. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, thanks. I was just going to mention a couple of things, really. One is you'll have seen the white paper on changes to health service organisation, which has been published, and the Act will no doubt be going through Parliament sometime before the summer. This will create integrated care systems and integrated care providers. Now, the Northamptonshire integrated care system has received approval from NHS England to move to the next stage, and it is expected it will be a fully formed ICS by April 2022. So that is a lot of work to be done in that area, and most of it is left deliberately vague for local solution, local resolution. A lot of work to be done with our incoming local authorities on that, because it is an integrated care system, not an integrated health system. And much of that needs to be worked through. So, as I say, a major bit of work for the coming year. Leanne mentioned comms, and I guess it will be of interest to governors after yesterday's conversation on governor assessment, self-assessment, was that we are putting in a significant amount of investment into improving our comms function at both hospitals, i.e. for the group and for Kettering, and that will be important for governors because they're doing a lot of work or thinking about how they communicate and how they wish to engage, so that will be supportive for that. On the white paper thing, I guess I know we need to do some work with governors, some briefings on that. It is obviously available on the NHS England website and on the government website to read about. And there are plenty of things on the NHS providers website which give a summary of it. But we will be doing in a future meeting, Richards, a briefing on where that, how thinking is evolving for that locally, and we'll take that forward. And the final thing is just a brief touch on vaccination. The vaccination program is going well, going very well in Northamptonshire. From a trust perspective, the numbers are still pretty good, but there is a difference between our white staff and our BAME staff. And there is a lot of work going on across the system to get representatives of the BAME community to do short video clips and encourage staff to have the vaccination. And obviously there comes a point where that is going to become a difficult problem. It's not an issue here at the moment, but I am aware that there are parts of the country that are considering very carefully how to handle a situation where a patient refuses to be treated by somebody who hasn't been vaccinated. That's obviously going to be an emerging problem, and you might imagine that would happen in restaurants and bars and other places as well. Care homes are already talking about vaccination. So we are at the moment trying very hard to persuade as many of our staff as possible and make it as easy for as many of our staff as possible to have the vaccination program. So that's enough for me. Anything on any of that? No. Oh, yes, I've lost it. Peter, yeah.
Just a quickie, Alan, regarding the white paper, Richard has circulated something that I got through from the providers on the white paper. It's obviously a much shorter version than the white paper itself, and hopefully all the governors have received that. If they haven't, then if they contact myself or Richard, then we can get it to them.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's worth noting, this is a significant cultural change. As I keep pointing out to people, you have to have worked in the health service for longer than 20 odd years to remember it before there was a competition and a purchaser-provider split. And this is taking us back towards a different arrangement. So it will be culturally difficult for many of our staff to think differently about things, both in the clinical commissioning group and in provider organisations, and it will take a little bit of time. And we also need to think very carefully, and I know I am pressing for some thinking at the county level about the role of governors in this, because governors, in your case, are very much focused on Kettering Hospital, quite rightly, and we're asking you to think about the group as well. And now government policy is taking us towards an integrated care system where decisions are made not in the interest necessarily of Kettering Hospital, but in the interests of the system. And I know NHFT are thinking about how to make sure that governors are involved in that decision-making process. It is a tricky problem because there is no equivalent, obviously, in primary care or in the CCG or indeed in Northampton General. So we will be thinking carefully about how to ensure governors are involved in an appropriate way there, such that we don't end up with the system making a decision, which when you look at it in isolation appears not to be all that good from a Kettering point of view or an NHFT point of view, but it is the best thing to do for the system. So this is again another cultural change that I think people will take a little bit of time to become happy with. Okay, I don't see anything on any of that. No. Right, board committee summaries included the integrated governance report. Quality, Chris, you are there. Chris.
Yes, thank you very much, Alan. We had a meeting on the 23rd of February, and the first thing we did was welcome Annette Bridgford as the other governor with Gail Chapman, so that was a good occasion. I think the thing that came to quality and safety, which has an impact on almost everything else, is that during recent months, during the height of the pandemic, the staffing situation was such that between 36 and 40% of the staff of Kettering General Hospital were not available to work. Any organisation that is under that pressure has an impact on the services that they deliver and on their quality and safety. So when you look at the integrated governance report and see things like difficulties in the area of ambulance handover, increasing numbers of falls, the response to complaints, you have to bear in mind that the staffing situation was such that anybody that was available was asked if they could help with the care of patients. Despite all of that hard work, Kettering has had 16 patients who've breached their 52-week waiting time. And that's, I know that that's a number that we have hit, but it is compared with the situation nationally, it's a very, very small number. So something to be proud of there. Leanne has already spoken at length about Ockenden, and I agree with her that we're in a very, very good position. We do require additional consultant hours to provide a second ward round on Saturdays and Sundays. But almost other than that, we're almost totally compliant with the recommendations of the review. I do have a slight concern about the Ockenden review, and that is that it requires maternity to be discussed at a board committee every month. And I'm concerned that in these time scarce period we're living in, that this might reduce the exposure and discussion of other services other than the maternity service. So I think there are a number of issues there, but overall it's the staffing issue, which hopefully as the pandemic subsides will improve. That's the most important quality and safety aspect. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. I know Gail's given apologies today. So Annette, anything from you on that as the Governor?
Oh, yes, good morning. Firstly, I'd like to thank Chris for arranging a meeting between myself, him and Gail to explain how the committee works and to welcome me. It was really appreciated. Thank you for that. It was a very full meeting, my first one, so a little overwhelming, but there was challenge from NEDs all the way through, but there's nothing to report from the meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't see any other questions being asked. PFNR, Damien.
Yeah, hi, good morning all. Can you
we're good.
Hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So just to report some of the highlights from PFNR, we met on the 19th of February. Chris has already covered the point around referral to treatment for patients within a 52-week period. And as he correctly said, there were 16 patients that did not get treated within that period. I think what I would say on that is that, and this applies to some of the other standards where we're not quite hitting the previous levels that we had hit pre-COVID, this was very well predicted by Joe Forkas. So it wasn't like this was a surprise. In the case of RTT, Joe had been saying for some time that the need to reallocate staff from, particularly in this case, theatres to critical care work would lead to us breaching that standard at some point. And I think, as Chris also correctly surmised, when you look at that, our Kettering's performance relative to the national standard across RTT and also the cancer 62-day standard, we are in the upper third compared to the national benchmark, which I think is really positive and testimony to how well the trust is holding up in these difficult times. And Chris talked well about the strains that COVID has placed on staff of the trust. Some things that Joe was particularly keen to highlight was the urgent emergency care standards. You may recall that Kettering was part of a pilot group to trial new metrics around urgent emergency care. And we've steadily seen improvement in many of those metrics. So, how long are patients having to wait around in A&E before they get assessed? How long do they have to wait before they have a pain score done, etc. And those standards have been on an improving trajectory. Joe's also had a window into how we compare to other trusts that were part of the pilot, and I think we are holding up really, really well. She can't share that benchmark data, but she gave assurance that Kettering is doing really well against those standards. Just to mention a couple of other of the key metrics we're tracking, super stranded patients went up to 83. The target is 38, and a lot of work is being done on discharge to see if that number can be brought back down. But obviously that is particularly difficult when you've got very ill patients in the hospital right now. The cancer 62-day standard was 82%. That's what we met. The standard, sorry, is 85%. So we're actually not that far off hitting the 62-day standard. And as I say, if you look in the pack, you'll see there's a couple of charts on national benchmarks, and referral to treatment is one. The 62-day standard is another, and we held up very well against that. Diagnostics, this is patients being undergoing diagnostics within a 6-week period. That was breached. 4.8% of patients in January were waiting longer, but again, that's to do with reduced capacity and reallocation of staff. From a finance point of view, nothing really significant to report. There was a positive 400k in-month variance, so the finance is kind of playing out how we thought it would. I think the trust is on track to break even for year end, which is the other key thing that we track within the finance part of the meeting. That's probably all I wanted to say. Happy to take any questions from anyone.
Okay, thank you, Damien. Peter, anything to add?
Without sounding a little bit like a broken record, I think the meeting was yet again another good meeting. I was very impressed about how concise it was. There was a lot of information coming across, and it had a potential for a long meeting, but it was kept very compact and very pertinent. And once again, the Neds did a great job in challenging some of the very difficult questions that Damien's already alluded to. So, yeah, a very good meeting. Nice to see how the improvement across the board was going, and yeah, well done, everybody.
Thank you for that. We are, of course, in kind of governance light at the moment, so it's always reassuring to know that the committees are working well in this light mode, which is, we'll be reviewing that in line with government guidance on coming out of lockdown over the next month or two, and finding a way forward to blend real meetings with virtual meetings and all the other things people want to do, learning lessons from this. But it is encouraging that the governors are saying that these committees are going well. Don't see any other hands? No. People, Janet, you didn't meet in February, but I'm sure you've got something to say.
Thank you. Yes, we did meet in February, but what I want to say is that I obviously meet with Mark and Paula from the Trust to go through the data. And part of going through the data meant when we had our joint people committee, where we were able to welcome Sheila White, who's our governor representative for Kettering, obviously from our NED perspective. We were able to focus on two things in the timescale that we had, which was an hour. The first was focus on people plan engagement feedback. Now, clearly governors have got a session coming up, so I won't go into great detail about that. But that was important to understand how that work was going on. Leanne mentioned cultural issues being really important, and clearly the people plan and the whole process around that and engagement is about cultural issues, organisational change, and keeping people on board. So I'm excited that governors will be hearing more about that shortly. Obviously, Sheila had a taster of it, but hopefully a lot more to come. But really, the main thing we wanted to look at was around staff wellbeing and really wanting to hear the views from the workforce. So we were invited as a group of colleagues to listen to 4 staff from Northampton and from Kettering to talk about their particular issues and how they'd been supported, and to get some understanding of the immense amount of stuff that the trusts are doing to really support people. And so things like personal reflections were really important, because we're hearing terms like moral injuries and so on. Some of you might see that in the press, which in reality is around the feelings people get as a result of the situation they find themselves in, things like guilt, and that's all to do with the COVID-19 experience, if you like, the sort of psychological distress, but it's not a mental illness. But clearly we heard about an experience of an individual who'd had to shield, and what she'd found really important were the support groups that had been put together to be able to have conversations between groups of people who were shielding, and almost to offer a support group for one another. There were some really positive points in that. And I think the other element was somebody was coming to tell us about the experience she'd had, her journey through COVID and recovery, and couldn't make it because her mother had passed away, the night before. So clearly, the sorts of things you're getting is a flavour of what's happening to a lot of people within our workforce. And we're hearing about the number of staff who are off. Lots of these experiences are really relevant. We heard about managers who were having to work from home and how they'd been supported to be able to do that appropriately. But it was a real mix of challenging situations that people were faced with, really superb reflections on what support structures and networks that are available to our workforce. It is immense. Now, I feel that the HR teams across our 2 trusts have really been listening and working hard to respond to what's required, but actually tapping into everything. So nothing is about duplication. And the real benefit of being able to come together is to access a lot more opportunities. And the network across the system was the other thing that was really interesting, was the fact that with all of these people working together, we saw some really inspiring opportunities being offered. It might not answer everybody's problem, but I think if you think about the current situation, how hard it's been to actually get things put in place. And I believe, and the feedback from non-exec directors and people who were part of that meeting was just in respecting how much had actually been achieved. And I suppose the query we were left with is that going forward, this sort of thing is still going to be required. And the amount of resource it potentially will take to underpin that was really significant. So thank you for the opportunity to tell you about that. And I did appreciate everybody's input into that meeting.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Anybody on that? No, nothing at all. Oh yes, who have we got? I've got a hand back. Can't quite see who it is. Stephen, Andrew. Sorry, Andrew. 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 If you're speaking, you're muted and your camera's off.
How's that?
Getting better.
How's that?
Can
you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you, but I can hear you. Okay, we're there now.
Yeah. Sorry, just saying, I just had a report this morning from Cheryl Bird, who's the Health and Wellbeing Board Business Manager, Public Health, Northampton County Council. They deal with the mental health issues and various problems, including the fallout from COVID. Just like to tell you that at the moment there are over 2,000 adults and 370 children waiting to assess mental health services. And at the moment there are over 2,000 under 15s on their caseload. Every month 495 new children referrals and 7,200 adults are referred to this service. And 5,900 people call their helpline every month. Just shows you how much mental health issues, which are partly related to COVID, are how much trouble they're actually causing. Thank you.
So if I could just respond, Chair, that was an area that was looked at in the meeting. And just to say that Sheila White was actually in attendance at the meeting as well.
Thanks. Trevor.
Thank you. Just like to expand on what Andrew just said there, and I don't know whether Leanne wants to say anything on this. It's not just about what's appearing as a mental health issue with, or whether it gets into those services or not, but there's also the issue of, particularly with self-harm. I sit on the safeguarding group, and one of the things that has come up there has been the increased number of both youngsters coming in with self-harm, or youngsters that are coming in and they have parents that are self-harming. So clearly there is a whole gambit of different diseases and elements that are going on that our services have to deal with, which are not directly COVID related, but are actually COVID is exacerbating some of the issues that maybe were there beforehand.
Yes, I thank you for that, Trevor. Clearly our colleagues in NHFT and in some of the charitable sector areas are under a great deal of pressure. We obviously look at KGH type of numbers, but the impact on their services is and will be huge. Janet, last word on this perhaps.
Thank you. Yes, sorry. It is important to recognise that self-harm was also subject to the presentation that we had at this meeting as well. So we are aware that colleagues are also looking at how they can support people through those situations too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it's going to be a long tail to this illness, both in terms of our waiting lists and our diagnostics, but also the mental health of the community. Alice, DHA, I don't see any other hands. Alice, did you?
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, so on the digital agenda, we continue to meet as a group digital hospital committee, and that continues to develop and relationships continue to form with Northampton, which is good to see. We're also in the process of appointing digital directors under the new group CDIO, so that we have a digital director for each of the hospitals, so that the group CDIO is free to be moving between the two, if you like. And we also had an interesting discussion, myself and David, who is the non-exec director co-chair from Northampton, have also been having some chats with some of the workstream leaders this week to just get up to speed on each other's portfolio, so we can look out for where we can share things more freely across the group. So working with the group, with Northampton, and working with the ICS is going to be one of our main priorities in the months / next few years to come. You will know that we've been working on a group digital strategy, which also begins to address this. But I think we need to think very carefully about how we, as Kettering, working with Northampton, can look to lead in the ICS digital space, and make sure that we don't just think hospital-wide, because that's not how patients are going to think. They want us to think county-wide or nationwide on this. So I think that's one of our big challenges to come. Other things just to update you on, we've been helping the outpatients team with looking at streamlining some of the communications and digital communications and booking of appointments and so on, and involving some automation in that. So that's been quite a major project at the moment. And also we're really pleased that EPMA, which if you remember is our electronic prescribing and administration system, is now in place in all the medical wards. And from an avoidance of harm perspective, that is a tremendous tick in the box. So we are really pleased to have been able to accelerate that, bizarrely during COVID, to get that in by the end of February. So that's a major achievement and a big difference to our clinicians on the ward day to day that will make. I think the only other thing to flag up then is Office 365 I've got on my list. I'm aware that for some of the governors, and I know for some of the NEDs, moving to Office 365 has been a bit of a mixed blessing, let's say. But I think that the reason we were keen to push on with that, and it is important long term, is it will tremendously help us and the clinicians to collaborate more closely with Northampton. We'll make that a lot easier in the long run. So my apologies if that's been a bit of a traumatic process. I know I had some troubles with it, so I'm sure lots of people did. But once it's done, I hope that will really help us going forwards. And happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Alice. Graham, as the governor.
Thank you, Alan. Not a lot to add. It's still there was good discussion and good collaboration. That's the thing that impresses me between the two hospitals. There's sort of trying to be one-upmanship. There's excellent collaboration and learning, and a good program that Andy's leading. So everything that Alice just said, I'm happy with. There was some good progress. One thing that could have come up that didn't, though it was a more general, was, and I think this might come up later on for us, is that no mention of the survey that's gone out, and I think that could have been something that was. I know it's part of the programme that could have been discussed and looked at and honed, shall we say? But no, some good challenge where it was necessary. But I think things are exactly as Alice said, progressing.
Thank you very much for that, Damien.
Yeah, not so much a question. I just wanted to come in. I mean, I sit on the Digital Hospital Committee as the second NED. And you're aware, in my life outside of being a NED, Alan, I see a lot of technology-based transformation programs, particularly in large public sector organisations. And I just wanted to commend the work of the Trust in that regard, because these programs have a propensity to go wrong, to be late, to cost more money than they were originally envisaged to cost, and to not deliver the business benefits. But in the case of Kettering, we have been trundling along quietly in the background. Programs are delivering. There have been the odd delay here. There has been the odd delay here and there, but it's been for good reasons, and we've rectified it where that's been possible. And most importantly, I think people are seeing the benefits in terms of the clinical community. So I just wanted to commend the work that Alice is doing with Andy Callow and the rest of the digital team. And I think the prospect of working towards a joint digital strategy with NGH is a really, really exciting one.
Okay, I think that's everybody. You can bask in reflected glory, Alice and Andy. It is, it is worth noting that I think that, the leadership, the exec and the non-exec leadership through committees, every single committee has a major change agenda on at the moment. Digital has a massive investment confirmed over the next 3 or 4, 5 years, 4 years, right across the county. We're changing the basic systems, the PAS systems in Northampton in a ridiculously short time. That's not particularly relevant to Kettering, but it will be as communications grow. And Andy has taken on a role of leading digital across the county, where there are huge benefits for patients out of hospital in monitoring patients and having case notes available, or records available to ambulance crews, to paramedics, to community staff. So there are huge benefits there, and that takes a great deal of leadership. And if you look at what Janet is doing in people with the whole national people plan and the whole agenda for that, and the recruitment and efforts going into that. Obviously, the Quality Committee has got a massive task with Ockenden. I know we're in a good place with it, but it doesn't mean it isn't a major political issue and a major public concern. And, PFNR has major changes to think about as we go through complete change from payment by results and tariff through to an entirely different contracting, funding, efficiency measuring system. So, sometimes it is just worth pausing and saying the change agenda, some of that is national, but a lot of that is local. A lot of that is unique to us. Good that it's unique to us, because it's all good stuff. And on top of that, of course, we're going to layer the integrated care system, and the role of non-execs on committees within the integrated care system is just beginning to come to the fore. Either as members of committees or in leadership roles on those committees from the three trusts that will be around, plus some GP representatives. So again, it is just worth reflecting on the responsibility and the role that execs and non-exec leaders have at the moment, compared to where we might have been 3 or 4 years ago, when there was a completely different set of problems and certainly a completely different set of drumbeats, if you like, about the scale of change and the fact we were marching upwards. Trevor, am I waxing too lyrical here?
Well, you're waxing too lyrical, but you've managed to miss out yourself. Because one of the biggest strategic projects going on is around the new build and urgent care. And I think the amount that, you know, from 2 or 3 years ago to where we are today in all these programs, you know, it was a case of we're on a sprint, but we're on a sprint on a marathon. And sorry to mix metaphors, but I think it is about us all working together to keep all these things going. But at the same time, as you heard from Leanne earlier, we are still operating and running a major acute hospital. These changes are going on. We have a major pandemic, and all of this is going on in parallel. So I think that's important to be recognised as well. But you did miss out the Strategic Development Committee.
Thank you very much, Trevor. You're on it as well, of course, so you can bask in glory for that too, as can Mr. Williscroft. Now, I've got another hand up somewhere. Who is it? I've lost it.
Me.
Graham. Oh, it's you, Graham. Sorry. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, observing other committees, the development is moving on at a great pace, and also something not been mentioned, the travel plan. That's been a very extensive travel plan has been done in very short order. I mean, okay, outside help, but it has been quite an extensive one's been done, and that's worth looking at for people as well, because it's a thing that, along with IT, is to the benefit of patients, hopefully. And what's most important is that all the time that's the focus of all these things, that they are to the benefit of patients, and that's also connectivity between us and the primary care network and things like that, to make sure that there's that all those can talk to each other and the records can be easily obtained, and everybody's working towards that, which is the impressive thing.
Thank you, Graham. Sometimes the connection can appear a bit lengthy, but you know, everything we do is about patient care and clinical quality. That's the purpose of life, and you know, and occasionally it's necessary in a board meeting even to say, let's just remember we're running a hospital here, guys. And so everything we do is about that, and the whole collaboration agenda and the academic strategy is about improving our clinical quality, and that is obviously got direct connections to patients. Anyway, it's my turn now, SDC. So thank you for that, Trevor. I was going to mention the travel plan, Graham, but you've done that, so thank you very much for that. The big issue, of course, was the approval of our strategic outline case by the board, which has now gone up to, by the committee and then by the board, which has now gone up to NHSE. And that's a crucial document in the process here. We've also thoroughly reviewed the energy centre and are going to think about that differently. It's quite clear that the pace of change in energy sourcing is a major issue, and the funding of that goes back into history a bit here, so I'm not going to bore you with it, but we are reviewing that now and how we go forward with that. And of course, it's intimately linked with the development control plan and the SOC and the pace of change of the rebuild of the hospital, in that you have to keep the two very much in sync as you go forward. And I suppose it is worth remembering at this point that the development control plan is now a crucial building block. A few years ago, we didn't have a development control plan for the hospital, and that's a bit of a gap. And now we have a very thorough, very well researched, very well professionally put together with some of the best experts from the UK, and indeed working in China and other places where hospital building programs are much bigger. So we have a very comprehensive baseline now to go forward. And the one thing I'd like to say to governors about this is, you know, we are on the list for what the Prime Minister has repeatedly called his 40 new hospitals. Now, we know that the nation's finances are stressed by COVID. You'd be a bit stupid, bit foolish not to know that. So, of course, we know that. But nevertheless, that commitment still exists. And whilst it will move between one CSR and another, that's comprehensive spending review round, and another as we go forward in debates with the Treasury, it is important that we maintain optimism and determination. We shouldn't reduce our sights here. We've been promised a new hospital. Our local MPs and others are very keen to keep pressing the button on that. And whilst we'll be going forward in a series of steps, that's what our SOC says, that's what our development control plan says, and you all know that. And that's a benefit, because we don't need to win an argument for £1 billion now. We need to win an argument for a steady commitment to the rebuild across the site. So there's no falseness in this. This is a plan which everybody needs to maximise our expectations on. It's not an expectation management problem. It is an expectation maximisation problem, so that everybody is enthusing that we're going to get a new hospital for Kettering. And it might take 10 years, it might take 15 years. That's really not the point. The point is to win that argument consistently as part of the Prime Minister's commitment to the 40 new hospitals. So that's really SDC is. It's a major milestone reached, and we'll be moving forward directly now. We're not waiting for anything. We're moving forward to the outline business case, and then no doubt in due case goes to the full business case. So, any questions on that? Let me just go. I see Mo's hand up. Let me go to Peter first as the Governor rep. Peter.
Thank you, Alan. Yes, I think you summarised the matter quite succinctly there. The only thing you missed was the fact that we had a special meeting a week or so ago on the PAM, the Premises Assurance structure, and that was always part of the SOC going forward, which is a process of managing how we deal with the situation that we got at present. But as always, I think the committee is a very vibrant one because it's a very emotional topic, and I think the subjects that you've touched on a little bit earlier were the main items of the meeting as far as I was concerned. And once again, we're moving forward. And to reflect what Trevor said, I think the pace of change has been quite dramatic and incredibly professionally run. So I think well done on all of that.
Thank you very much. Mo.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive summary, which is very encouraging. And also at the beginning, you asked us to think like a group instead of thinking for Kettering only. I'm afraid I'm a bit selfish on that one. I've seen Coventry from a small hospital to a university hospital when they had a new build, and it was quite a huge, very helpful for students and become a medical school as well. Does the promise of the Prime Minister that we'll have a new hospital, will that delay our effort to become a university hospital at all?
No, that's not our expectation, Mo. Governors will know, and you were there, Mo, of course, that we had a meeting with representatives from the university. You know, I personally used to sit on the central R&D committee for the NHS, and I've worked with 2 previous national directors of R&D, so I am deeply embedded in the whole principle of clinical services getting better as a result of research and development, and the academic connections with a medical school like Leicester. And of course, it's not just medicine; they've got other specialties there, nursing, and we've also got nursing in Northampton, of course. Slightly different type of nurse that they aim to produce, but nevertheless, or rather, Kettering has a different end. Not Kettering, and Leicester has a slightly different approach to its nurse training, but both are crucial in our forward travel. So the business of how you recruit people, how you raise clinical quality are all fundamental. I don't see any reason to think of a delay there, Mo. We expect.
Well, I hope so, but I attended that meeting with Andy and the representative. I felt that the focus was on Northampton General rather than both in the same time.
No, we will be marching forward absolutely in step. The academic strategy applies to both hospitals. It applies to the group, and indeed we could not become a university teaching group, a university teaching hospital, unless we march forward together. It would not work for Northampton or Kettering alone. Richard.
Thanks, Alan. Assuming that we're done on SDC, I just wanted to note before we move off, I don't think we covered the Governor rep on the People Committee, which is Sheila, if we're ready and she's got any comment.
That's because I haven't got it on my bit of the agenda because the committee didn't meet formally, but I'm very happy.
Formally, yeah.
Where are you, Sheila?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I did go to that one meeting, the first joint meeting, which I think I said at the last governors' meeting was very positive and a great willingness to work together. I've since had a meeting with Janet on Teams for a chat and subsequently a telephone call. I'm just looking forward to finding the dates for the next meetings, which Janet says are yet to be set.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm sure Janet will look forward to the phone call and it will happen in the fairly near future. I don't see any other hands. Finished with SDC, finished with the whole IGC business. Yes, going, gone. And hopefully Richard Cook is there. Let me just look for him. Yes, I see Richard Cook. KGH charity transfer of assets. Now, Richard's going to give us an updated version of the staff briefing slides, setting out the reasons for why we're doing this and the latest position with the proposal and the benefits that we expect to come from that. And the transfer of the assets, the KGH charity to the Northamptonshire Health Charity. Just want to make it clear for governors that as you disseminate any messages about this, particularly staff governors, but also all governors, that people can still give to KGH. It will just be administered by a different body. We are holding the funds, or they are holding the funds entirely separately. But it gives, anyway, the arguments or the logic is in the slides. Richard, over to you, unless Janet wants to start this off. Janet, no? I'll go, oh, hold on.
Yeah. Yes,
yeah. Janet, you first, you can hand over to Richard or whoever.
Thanks. Just to say a huge thank you to everybody who's been involved in this piece of work. So my fellow non-exec directors, but it's important to recognise this has also got to go back through the board. The team of people in the organisation who've undertaken this work, Richard and members of the finance team. It has been a huge amount of work, and the due diligence that's been undertaken is really significant. So, you know, I'm happy to support what Richard's here today to talk to you about. So thank you. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Richard?
Thank you, Janet. I'll just share my screen. So hopefully everybody can see the presentation.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you. So I've come along today to just brief you and give you an update on the intention to merge the Kettering General Hospital Charitable Fund with the Northamptonshire Health Charitable Fund, which, if approved by the Trust Board, would take effect from the 1st of April. As Janet has said, we're currently working through a whole process of legal and financial due diligence, and I can talk to you about some of that as part of this presentation. First key fact is that the Northamptonshire Health Charitable Fund is an independent charity and has been established to raise and oversee the spending of funds for both Northampton General Hospital and NHFT, Northamptonshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust. And so with us merging with that organisation, it would become the county health charity. We're working with them to enable the merger, as I've said, to take effect from the 1st of April, although subject to the Trust Board's final approval when it meets later in March. So I think the first thing to say is that many aspects of the charity won't change as a result of the merger. So within the KGH Charitable Fund, we have a number of designated funds for various wards, departments and services, and they will remain as they are now, with the money held being spent on their intended purpose for the benefits of KGH patients and staff. So, for example, we have the KGH Radiology Fund. The KGH Radiology Fund would remain a designated fund for that purpose. Individuals can still choose to donate money specifically for KGH or for a service area within KGH as they do now, and that donation will be allocated to the respective designated fund. So again, to take the example, say, of the KGH Radiology Fund, in the future, if a satisfied patient or a member of somebody's family wanted to donate money for the benefit of the KGH Radiology Fund, they'd still be able to do that. The Twinkling Stars appeal will continue, and NHCF have given us their assurance that they would continue to operate that as a major fundraising appeal for the Trust, with money going specifically towards the planned bereavement suite. We have the KGH Staff Lottery, and that will continue to operate as a KGH lottery, with the benefits of that going to the KGH Staff Benefit Fund as it does currently, and the fund manager for that fund being the Health and Wellbeing group of KGH. And there'll still be a fundraising presence on the KGH site. NHCF will operate from the existing fundraising office in Latimer House, and the processes that we have to support the charity will continue to be supported by the KGH Cashiers Service. Some things, though, will change. So as an independent charitable organisation, the NHCF has a board of trustees. KGH will have 2 nominated trustees on that board, as do NGH and NHFT. So there are nominated trustees from each of the 3 organisations, with the remainder being independent appointed trustees. There'll be a KGH Charity Management Subcommittee of that board, and that will comprise members drawn from KGH, but also attended by the Charity Director of NHCF, and it will be chaired by one of our 2 nominated trustees. And the function of that subcommittee will be to advise and oversee the administration of the KGH charitable funds. We currently have fund managers, so each of our designated funds has a nominated fund manager whose responsibility is to ensure that those funds are spent on their intended purpose. Now, within the NHCF, those fund managers are known as fund advisors. They have delegated authority to spend up to £5,000 in the same way as our fund managers do currently, although they need to inform the charity of their intention to spend so that the charity then cross-checks the fund balance and that the intentions meet the fund objectives. Any spends over £5,000 have to be approved by the KGH subcommittee and would be subject to our usual internal approval processes before it got to the KGH subcommittee, such as our internal investment management committee, if it's spent on equipment or capital. And any spends over £25,000 would need to be approved by the Board of Trustees. So why are we recommending this particular change? One of the key things is that the cost of fundraising is met by NHCF through income received from investments. Currently at KGH, our charitable fund, we apportion the costs of fundraising across individual funds. So we feel that's a significant benefit. There'll be increased capacity, skill mix expertise to support fundraising for KGH, in that our fundraising would be overseen by a larger team with county-wide links. And we know that independent charities are able to access funds from a wider range of sources than we're able to as an NHS charity. The charity itself is an independent body and has a transparent trusteeship model. As I've said, it has a number of appointed trustees who are drawn from the local community with specific skills to support the activities of the Board of Trustees. And I think also importantly is that staff working for the charity are themselves part of a wider charitable organisation. So people who are drawn to fundraising as a career, as a role, have then got opportunities for development and support within their chosen sphere of work. I thought it'd be helpful to just share a few examples of how NHCF have helped NGH over the period 2019 to 20. So they've spent money on patient welfare, and that's enabled NGH to improve things like patient day rooms and long-term cancer patients. It funds staff training and welfare and spent £146,000 on those sorts of improvements over the course of the year, supported research funding, and it also funded the patient buggy service in the provision of new vehicles for that service during that particular year. So I think hopefully this just shows that the links between NHCF and the hospitals that they support do deliver the benefits that we'd be looking to see for KGH. So in terms of next steps and things that we've done, we have contacted all of our existing fund managers individually to inform them of the potential merger. And we've also held a briefing session for fund managers. We're in the process of placing some frequently asked questions for staff generally on KNet, and we held 2 staff briefing sessions as well, taking advantage of the KGH all staff session to share with our staff the intention to merge. As we've said, there's a due diligence exercise that's underway so that the trust board can be satisfied when it meets in March that the merger can be approved and that the interests of KGH patients and their families and staff are protected. We'll be issuing some public-facing comms in the very near future, informing our donors and potential donors about the merger, and which would respond to any concerns that people may raise. I've put my contact details on here because often in situations like this, people go away and think about it and then think, but what about X or Y? And so my email address is here. Please, if you do have any sort of queries about what this might mean, or you have any thoughts, please do let me know, and I'll do my best to come back to you with an answer. And there's also there the link to the website of NHCF as well, where their annual report and accounts are held, and also details of their activities. Their annual report is a really good read in terms of an overview of how the charity operates, and hopefully also addresses any questions or concerns that people might have as well, in that it clearly shows the many good works that the charity undertakes on behalf of the NHS organisations that it supports. That's really the sort of end of the overview. I'm happy to take questions. I don't know if, Janet, you have anything else to add? And shall I take the presentation down?
Yes, please. Take the presentation down, Richard. And Janet, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, just to be clear that there have been the non-executive director and executive directors who've formed a small working group who've been working alongside Richard and the team in order to check out all of the due diligence work and most, meeting frequently in order to address that. So Alice and Trevor have been heavily involved with it, as have I, in terms of being satisfied that the process and what we're looking for is being addressed. So thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Any questions on this change at all? Obviously, you can send them in later to Richard. Graham.
Yes, thank you. I'd seen the presentation before, so it's fine. I can understand how funds that are directed towards Kettering will be protected and spent at Kettering, but how are funds that go directly to the charity NHCF? How are they handled and distributed? How do they decide where those funds would go?
So the Board of Trustees of NHCF, if you like, oversee the allocation of funds. KGH and the KGH Charity Management Subcommittee, with its fund advisors, can bid for those funds. So if there isn't an existing KGH fund that's, if you like, designated for a particular task, but there is somebody within the organisation who is seeking charitable funds to support a particular initiative, would be able to bid to NHCF for that funding to the Board of Trustees in a similar way as would happen currently with the KGH General Fund through our Charitable Funds Committee. The NHCF also utilise their funds. They some have in the past run schemes where they do a kind of fund matching initiative as well for particular fundraising initiatives. So they may say to a fund advisor who approaches them for funding for something, well, if you raise £1,000, we'll match it with £1,000 from the NHCF General Fund. So it's done through those kinds of processes, Graham.
Okay, Mo.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard. In my long years at Kettering, our colleagues in Corby and the clubs, Grambian and other clubs, raised a lot of money, and we kept them in hospital, in the hospital finance system. And some clever clogs bought a lot of shares with this money, and we lost a lot of money in that. Are you going to be free to spend this money in that way at all?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I fully understand the question.
I'm not sure.
Right.
Are you asking if they can invest the funds in any way they wish, or are you asking about expenditure?
Yes, because you said you are an independent organization. Yeah.
No, but you're asking about investment patterns or expenditure patterns?
The investment, it was invested in chairs, and we lost a lot of money, and we couldn't explain it to our people who raised the money that we are the culprits. So it was a bit sad, really.
Okay, so obviously I don't know anything about that event, but Richard, do you have any comment on the investment strategy of NHCF?
So NHCF have investments. They also own the property that they operate from. So my understanding is that our charitable funds would not be used or used to, if you like, prop up the investment fund. The investment fund has its own investment committee, and one of the trustees of that charity is an investment specialist who provides the advice and support that they require. I don't know, Trevor, if there is anything you would add on that.
Damien has his hand up before Trevor does. Damien has his hand up. Damien.
Yeah, so I think where Mo was probably going is a question around what are the controls that ensure that the fund is not inappropriately invested and therefore you risk losing the money. I think that's probably the question, Mo, that you were, if I may be, if it's not impolite of me to suggest that that's maybe what
Indeed, yes, we were very sad, very angry as well. Thank you.
Okay.
So
Trevor.
in terms of both in terms of having a specialist advisor as one of the other trustees, whereas an expertise, it's also covered off by charity law in terms of minimising risk on investments. The current chair of the charity also has a long track record in finance as well, although he's not sitting as chair on that for that reason. So given the expertise around the table, I think we are confident. They may lose money one year, gain money another year. I think the issue is about minimising risk and overall providing a form of funding that supports the charitable work of across the Northamptonshire health economy. I think, but Mo, there's always a risk with any investment. It's how you manage that risk, and actually the committee structure within the charity, and this is part why we did due diligence, is there to actually make sure that the risks and rewards are balanced on the basis of a charity, rather than the way you would do risks and rewards if you were setting up a new business.
That's acceptable, but of course, as you said, there is a person there to. His main focus is to minimize the risk, because this is money raised by the public. Thank you.
Okay, well, on the basis of the story, Mo, it sounds as if it can only be better under NHCF than it was under Kettering, if that's what happened when Kettering did it a few years ago. Alice and then Graham.
Thank you.
So it was just to follow up on that, really, and Mo, it's a fair question, but Trevor's right. Charity law would require it to be a more conservative policy. But I think it is just fair, in the interest of transparency, to flag up that at the moment we have a policy at Kettering of not investing charitable funds. The Northamptonshire Health Charity has a slightly different policy in that they do invest charitable funds. However, the upside of that is that covers a big chunk of the administration costs, and that, I think, was one of the big rationales for us as directors in terms of getting comfortable with the move, that it saves us on administration costs, which actually means more of what people give can be spent if you have all those appropriate investment controls in place.
Graham.
Yeah, I was going to say, I assume that there is a published Treasury management plan. I mean, for instance, the councils can only invest in banks with a AAA rating and only invest in those UK or formerly EU based. Something like that that's available to reassure people a proper annually assessed Treasury management plan is what you need.
Absolutely, and there is and there will be. So yeah, fair point, Mo. Good caution for everybody, but it will come through the board who are the current trustees. Thank you for that, Richard. I don't see any other hands up. Again, repeat any other comments. Richard Cook 6 at NHS. Whatever it was, Richard was up there.
Yeah.
Please feel free to question him in due course, and I'm sure any emails into the governance team would be forwarded to Richard if you haven't got that email address. So thank you very much. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Governor Effectiveness Survey. Now, this is a bit of a follow-up to yesterday's workshop, which the survey was completed by 15 out of 17 governors. Next steps now around the agreement of development plans and comms training and such, and expressions of interest from governors wishing to join any of these groups to make sure that's a very broad-based, open, transparent process. So I think we have a couple of slides, one of the Richards, on the basis that was prepared mostly by NHS providers, I gather, on the head of yesterday's, just to see if there's any conversation needed today about it. Have we got that?
Yep, it's coming. Richard's going to put it up and I'll talk to it briefly and just give an opportunity for everyone to comment. So this is the slide. Hopefully everyone's got it. I can see it on my screen. These were the key areas for development that came out of the survey and out of the workshops and the conversations yesterday. So that should be wholly recognisable. What we've done from yesterday is put a second slide, which you won't recognise because we just did it yesterday after the workshop, on what are the quick wins that we think we can do to help with some of this. And then it would be just useful to have a conversation, as Alan said, about what do we do next? What do the governors want to do? Who wants to be involved and where? So do you want to move the slide on, Richard, and we'll do the quick wins? So the team development, the first bullet point there is the work that we want to continue with our own internal HROD support. That's Victoria Marchant, who many of you will met through the session we did in autumn and was in the conversation yesterday. IT support. So serendipitously, from tomorrow, there will be a raft of iPads ready. So our digital colleagues have invested for the governors in procuring a bunch of iPads, which should help with access to NHS Mail and Teams, which will also mean that the IT department can support governors. I think one of the major problems that governors have had is not being able to get support on your own equipment, because obviously our IT department don't know what your equipment is, how it works, and they can't access it and support it remotely. So there will be a process, and Richard and Manisha will be in touch with governors in terms of how people can get those, how we can get them to you, or how you can collect them safely and securely from a COVID point of view, and how you can get trained and ready to use those. So there will be more communication about that in the very near future, and with that there will obviously be training for how to use the software and the kit itself, get you set up on your emails, get you set up on Teams, etc. Richard and I were very happily joined for a long day on a Friday a couple of weeks ago by Mabel, and we interviewed for a Deputy Trust Secretary. We have offered and had the offer accepted by a young lady called Victoria, who starts with us on the 10th of May. She's currently working in local authority over in Cambridgeshire, and she did really well at interview. It was a great opportunity to have a conversation with a number of candidates, but Victoria really shone. So she will join us and she'll be doing direct support for the governors, and she'll be leading our membership drive through the summer into our next round of elections. But to supplement that even further, we're putting in a bid to this year's budget round for a membership and engagement officer, which should support Richard and the Deputy Trust Secretary, again, to work on increasing the membership, making it more representative in the public constituencies. The working group on inductions is going to continue that work and hopefully canvass with other governors. And the communication subgroup we mentioned briefly, we need to put a process together just to help agree who's going to be on that and how it's going to work. Protected time for staff governors has been through a formal governance process through the operational management group. So staff governors who have been elected should be able to have essentially, in essence, their job description amended to give them protected time. And so we've put some robust wording in contractually in there, and we should be able to make a difference for staff governors. And again, there'll be a process for, if that's not working, to come through me to try and resolve any issues. And then lastly, one of the things we talked about yesterday as a result of the survey was maximising the skills of the Council of Governors. So we have in the past, governors who've been with us a bit longer might remember, done a thing called a skills audit. So we will redo that skills audit this year, taking into account governors that have joined, redo that skills audit and help with the help of the Governor Improvement Group, have a look at where can we maximise and deploy skills of the governors, and what does it mean for future bespoke training programmes where perhaps we might have a deficit across the whole of the council on a particular skill. So how do we train individuals up and get people through so that we've got a really well supported Council of Governors whose skills are being used and we recognise where gaps are and what we can do about it. Those are our quick wins, but really this was an opportunity to have a conversation for 10 or 15 minutes on reflections from yesterday, how the governors want to take things forward. I'm hoping you had a conversation in your pre-meet this morning, and if Peter's there, I can't see my screen now, I can just see the slides. So I'm hoping, Peter, you can help us lead through another conversation about how we take this forward.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, we had a brief conversation this morning, but the topic is quite voluminous in the sense that I think we need to have a little bit of time to reflect on some of the critical areas. The second slide that you put up, I know you shared that last night, and I saw it as well. And I think there are two groups already established there which cover off probably the main issue. And the pre-meeting group were very keen to extend the fact that most of their views are around communication. If that is got right, then a lot of the other things will fall into line. Now, I think it's difficult to be precise about this, but I think we all understand that communication comes in different forms. And this is why the subgroup is intended to work through the strategy of this, not necessarily the means of delivering it, but the strategy as to how we should address it. And that was a topic that we did discuss this morning. As far as the skills audit bit is concerned, I think just to extend on what you've said, I think skills audit for me is as much about people's understanding of how the hospital works and how the NHS works, as opposed to their own individual skill sets. They can be very competent in what they did as career, but the issue is really how can they blend that with what is required to understand as a governor the workings of the hospital. And that really is the issue that I think most of us have faced coming into this as an outsider. And so that is where I'd like to put some focus in the future. I think the other way of dealing with this, and I know you've suggested we spend 10 minutes this morning to having this conversation, but I think it takes a longer period of that. I think we should have another meeting with the governors, at least an hour, 2 hours perhaps, just to discuss exactly what this really means to us. There was a lot put forward yesterday, and I think the three working groups that were set up came up with some cracking ideas, but we now need to blend them into a way forward, a strategy to take the whole thing forward. So yes, I think we've made a start on it. I think as you've said, the two groups that we have in existence, in my view, are the critical areas. They've both had an opportunity to discuss things this morning when we had the pre-meeting. Excuse me. And the communication group needs some more members. There's only two people that I've asked to form that group at the moment. They're David and Mabel, and so I think what I'd like to do is use some of that time this morning to get other interested parties to put their names forward to be part of that. Now, the risk, of course, is that we are all interested in communication, therefore everybody puts forward their name. But we've got to be a little bit sensible about this and leave that group to deal with some strategic thinking on it and bring it to the rest of us. Nothing gets approved until the council approve it. So we must remember that. It's not a group in isolation. So that would be my initial comments on that, Richard. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys. Do you want to take expressions of interest now from governors, Peter, or do you want to run a separate event?
Well, let's just. I mean, I think everybody's here now, so why don't we just see who wants? If you move on, yeah.
Mabel has her hand up. Mabel.
Yes, thank you. David and I have had some discussions on this. We have put together an outline strategy, but we do want other people to work with us very much, because obviously David's in Corby, I'm in East Northamptonshire, so we want other people from Wellingborough, particularly in Kettering. We don't want too big a group. I've already had expressions of interest from Sheila, so delighted to have some more expressions of interest. And David and I have drafted our initial thoughts, and I'll circulate those to the governors generally when we refine them a bit.
Thanks,
but
Mabel.
Lovely
I presume you're expressing an interest with that hand, but over to you, Sheila. Sheila?
Yeah, sorry, I was unmuting. Yes, I was going to say I've already expressed an interest to Mabel. We do chat quite frequently.
Okay, thank you. And I see Gail's put something in the chat. Gail's joined us. Thank you, Gail. Nice to see you here, Gail, saying she would like to assist on that. Graham.
Fabulous.
Unmute. Yeah, I'm keen on that, and I'm happy to go on and help on the comms, and that fills the Wellingborough category.
Okay, I think we've got a bit of geographic coverage now. There's another one. So wait, Wendy.
Wendy, yeah.
Yeah, Wendy.
That's fabulous.
I think it's Sheila, not myself.
Oh, Wendy's
I'm down as CB.
Hand is up.
Yeah, WS. I think, is that not Sheila White?
WP I'm looking at.
I'm sorry, Wendy Patel. Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, nothing.
Well, I think we probably have a core of that, and I'm sure other people will reflect on it and come back to us later. But thank you for everybody that's contributed to that. And if there's any gaps, I can obviously fill in as well, Mabel and David. So
okay,
that's great. We have a good distribution.
Look, Peter, if you liaise with Richard on what you want by way of future meetings and all the rest of it, particularly as the iPads become available and all the other opportunities, we're kind of in your hands a bit on this, although the end product has to be clearly a blend of what we can support and what we can provide here. But we're happy for these conversations to proceed. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Mabel.
Yes, fabulous. Thank you.
Okay. Peter, do you want to finish it? Anything?
Just to say thank you for those people who volunteered to do that work. I think it's an important piece of work. It's probably the most important piece of work that we'll do during the course of the year, to be honest. I also want to make sure that when you look at the survey results, there was quite I keep using the expression of a bell curve, but there was a bell curve. There was extreme positivity on one side and negativity on the other. And for me, the important thing is to get that more evenly spread across the governors. So we want to try and deal with those matters that were quite wrong as far as some of them are concerned, and deal with that as we go forward. It may or may not be communication, but whatever it is, I want to get to the bottom of it.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Yes, I think there was quite a spread of opinion, and certainly quite a lot of divergence of opinion in the free text areas. But I think from our point of view, there was also rather a divergence about the way forward. I mean, you expect a divergence of opinion. That's just what curves normally look like. But I think what we're looking for is the council to work as a group and agree the way forward here, because we can't improve that bell curve, if you like, if we don't know what the consensus is about how to move forward and what kind of role we want governors to have. So, I mean, I think it's important that you keep meeting and having discussions about that survey exercise. Final comment, Richard?
Thanks. Just kind of bringing the governance together, really. So we've got asked the council to formally establish the comms group and appoint the 6 governors to it, being David, Mabel, Sheila, Gail, Graham and Wendy. And also, so the first task for that group would be to bring forward a draft strategy as part of kind of scoping in terms of reference work, and we'll bring that initially to the next governor overview group if we can. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Mabel's nodding, so I guess that means it's right. Wait a minute, who is that? It's just a photograph. Sheila, your hand is still up. I'm kind of assuming that's an old hand.
Yeah, it's a latent hand.
Thank you. Okay, Annette. Anne.
Hi, yes. The training and induction, governor induction, is this going to come under the envelope of communication now, or is it going to still carry on as an independent group?
I think in the slide Richard put up, it's an independent group, but Peter may have to comment.
Yeah, no, I definitely see it as an independent group, because we don't want to dilute the effect of the communication group by looking at other things. And in much the same way as I think membership recruitment is a separate issue as well. So yes, it will be separate, Annette.
Okay, thank you.
Clearly, we have to run a significant recruitment exercise. One of the issues is after the recent validation of the membership, we're down to a relatively low level. So we do need to run a process to raise the membership up to an appropriate level. Otherwise, the entire mechanism of elections and representation and communication kind of fails. So there was quite a bit in Richard's slide. He glossed over it a bit about somebody to help with recruitment and of governors from right across the catchment area. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else. No. Okay, thank you for that. Item 7, over to you, Trevor.
Thank you, Alan. I'm muted. So item 7, and I think Gail came in briefly as left. Is that correct, Richard?
Yes, it is, yes.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the appointment and remunerations group, we met last week. I say it met last week. I was in attendance at the group, and really sort of we went through the process that Peter and I had undertaken in reviewing Alan's performance, looking at the strengths, looking at what could be done better. You have a copy on Appendix A of the summary of that work. I think what was important was that we were looking at it from multiple perspectives. And this year, as opposed to last year, quite differently, I went and talked to 2 external sources as well. Joe Watts, the chair of the CCG, and also David Moores, who's my opposite number at NGH. That was particularly important, given that in terms of the objectives we'd set, Alan, a lot of these were focused on group and the system. So actually getting some feedback from them, as well as talking to non-exec directors and executive directors, was important. Peter, do you want to comment on the governors element, please?
Yeah, thank you, Trevor. Yes, the governors, we met to have I wouldn't say an informal chat, but it was a chat about how we felt Alan had performed, generally speaking. We see Alan for a short period of time as governors. He chairs the council as we're doing today. But other than that, a lot of what goes on is a reflected position, and it comes through board committees, etc., etc. So we took the view that as far as we were concerned, we had certain views about how Alan had conducted himself during the course of the year, and they've been tabulated in the papers that are before you. I think in terms of the actual objectives, I had to take a great deal of my leadership from Trevor because of the wider scope that he's just described in putting to this. And at the A&R meeting, this was all discussed in some detail, and we decided as a group that this was something we wanted to put forward and recommend that the council agrees the recommendations that you can see in the papers. So that's as far as I think we need to go on that one, Trevor.
Yeah.
I think the piece of work that you put together and has been sent around is very comprehensive. And the only thing I would say in that is that it was made clear in that documentation that we hadn't sat down with Alan to discuss next year's objectives. And the logic for that, I think, is quite straightforward in as much that there's so much changing at the moment that these would normally not be created until around about the end of March, if not the beginning of April. And in fact, in previous years, they've been much deeper into the year than that. So given the changes around the group model, the staff changing, and of course, Alan will have to go through the objectives with the non-execs and the executive team before we can really see a reflective number of objectives for himself. So we're recommending that those objectives will be dealt with by Trevor and myself during the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks and come before the council at the appropriate time. Is that in agreement with yourself, Trevor?
Yes, I think the other dynamic that we're in, which is coming out of COVID, we've got the NHS is going to be resetting exactly how we plan going forward, never mind the white paper, how we're going to be resetting the NHS. And in terms of Alan's objectives, that has to be a sort of a critical component of that going forward. So are there any questions in terms of the papers you have before you? As Peter said, we did go through all this at the appointments remuneration group, and along with the fact that we weren't actually setting objectives at the moment, that this was going to be something that would be put back a couple of months after we've done this particular part of the exercise. I can't see any hands up. No.
Can we assume, therefore, that the council is accepting the proposal of the A&R group? A wave or a shake or a thumb or anything will do.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, everybody.
We can invite Alan back into the room.
Right. Okay, guys, that's the end of the meeting. Any other business at all? Anything anybody wants to raise? No, I don't see any hands. I don't see anybody waving. No. Okay. Oh, sorry, one hand's gone up. Where is that? Richard.
Sorry, Alan, I was just going to bring your attention of this Wendy Brackenbury's last meeting as NCC rep. Just want.
Yeah, I got that. I was going to say thank you to Wendy. You're disappearing as your entire local authority, but moving on with 2 other things. I presume you're not planning to come forward as a governor from the new unitaries.
Well, yeah, thank you for that, Alan and Richard. Yeah, can I just apologise for not attending so many meetings this last year. I've been very busy with local government reform, and I've been given the shadow portfolio for children, families and education. So that has, I'm standing for re-election, but there'll be somebody else appointed after elections to be a governor. I will be we've agreed that the outside body appointments in the interim period from the 1st of April to the 10th of May, when newly elected councillors will take up their positions, will remain as they are. So I will stay as an appointed governor till the 10th of May, but there are no other board meetings, I understand, until the 2nd of June. So this will be my last meeting.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure you've got that portfolio. We will be coming across you because children is a major item on the ICS list. So thank you for all you've done, and I hope you do well in your new portfolio role. Graham.
Thank you. I just wondered whether I thought we were going to have a brief discussion amongst us about the distribution of the survey that's gone out on communication. I don't know whether that's something we wanted to talk about.
I don't know. I can't help with that. Anybody?
It was discussed at the pre-meeting that there's a survey come out. I haven't seen it myself, but Gail brought it to our attention this morning, asking us to fill in this survey regarding how we felt remote counselling and communication for outpatients, etc., was going. It was felt at the time that perhaps the notification of that wasn't widely spread out very well. Gail's not on the call, unfortunately, so she can't relate to it. I don't know whether anyone else is on the call who has seen it.
Sounds like the blind leading the blind here a little bit. Mabel, are you relevant? Are you in a position to talk to us about this?
Something completely different. I was.
Well, let's pause on that. Sheila, are you talking about the survey?
Yes, what I was going to say was I would have thought it would have been circulated to members, and I don't. Governors are members, and I haven't heard anything. In fact, I've had very little communication as a member over the last year.
I honestly can't help. I have no idea what we're talking about here. Eric,
we will find out and make sure that it gets circulated.
Can I come in?
That's worrying in itself.
Hold on, everybody. Eric first, and then David.
Yeah, I missed the start of the discussion in the pre-meeting, but I got the impression that the survey had gone out on LinkedIn.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I think we're going to have to come back and find out the answer to this.
Can I just quickly? Gail informed us that there had been a post by Andy Callow on LinkedIn, and it's gone out on a couple of other social media platforms, asking for people to fill in a questionnaire in relation to various communications aspects using technology and so forth for various things. And we were unaware of this. We've had discussions in the past about the effectiveness of the communications. We all appreciate the difficulty given the fractured nature of social media, the decline of local press and so forth. But this has gone out, and we were just concerned that it was done without due consultation, without consideration to how that was going to be put out and connect with the communities across the various channels. We're also concerned about the construction of the questions. So I think, generally this comes back to this whole communication thing. And there are some issues that have been coming through to governors with regards to some of these practices that have been taking place over the last year due to COVID, which is understandable. But I think there is a concern that certain things are moving too quickly without due consideration and without due rigor. And I think everybody felt that there needed to be a more in-depth conversation about some of this. Is that a reasonable summary, Peter?
Yes, thanks for that, David. I did stumble around a little bit trying to explain that, so that was very, very eloquently put. I think really it's perhaps a matter to take offline, going back through Andy, and maybe I should do that and see if we can't look at how that come about, because all that David said is absolutely the case, and I think it's an important piece of work, but we all know how you can construct the answers that you want to receive by asking the right questions. So we just need to have another look at this. So.
Sure, you're not suggesting that about our Chief Digital Information Officer, but anyway, Andy's
absolutely not, Chairman. Absolutely not.
Andy's a great user of social media and digital communication. So let's see if we can find a way to resolve your concerns here.
I'll take it up. I'll take it up with Andy and see if we can't get a way forward and link that back through the comms team.
Okay, I see a thing in the chat from Jane, which is also extremely helpful. And I think, you know, we're looking for the widest possible communication with patients here. And it's on the KGH website or the social media platforms. And I do remember now Andy talking about it in one of Simon's trust briefings. So, good. Okay, guys, thank you for raising that. Peter will take it forward. You know, we're into the widest possible communications, and that's all good stuff. It's certainly the way Andy likes to do things, and I'm sure you'd encourage that. Mabel, you said you had another topic.
Yes, it's something entirely different. Last year, the Government Hospital Food Review reported, and they made various recommendations, one of which was that somebody at board level should be responsible for food and nutrition. And I've been told that it's Leanne's responsibility now, and I'm delighted that she's been appointed to that role.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mabel. Anything else at all? No, no other hands up. Okay, guys, so thank you for that. Good meeting. Next meeting is the 2nd of June. We will be doing a review of virtual meetings after the end of March, which will be linked to the government's roadmap for exiting the lockdown. It is relevant to your discussions about effective communication. So we've got to obviously continue social distancing precautions and think about moving to a hybrid model of virtual and face-to-face. Now, I know we've agreed a big increase in governor membership, but the practicalities of that does concern me a little bit, in that we're potentially moving to 30 plus governors. And when you add in the attendance of non-exec directors and perhaps exec directors to meetings, we obviously can't hold those in the future in the boardroom, because the capacity will not accommodate that. So the only meeting room we have for that is the recreation hall, which apart from anything else can be very cold in the winter. I'm sure we can do something about that, but nevertheless, it's a tricky room. It's got poor acoustics, and I am concerned about our ability to actually hold a full face-to-face meeting of 30 plus governors, plus non-execs, chairing committees, plus whatever, in a way that allows us to even hear each other in some of the circumstances, particularly where people are perhaps not used to speaking in committees or in larger groups. So we will have to think about that quite carefully, about how we do this in a way that empowers and engages with, given the sheer scale of the meetings that we're going to be attempting to run in the future. So I'd be grateful if you just think about that in your communications group and thinking about how you wish to take meetings forward. Okay, that's my bit finished. I think that's everything. I don't see anybody on that. Mabel's hand is still up, but I'm guessing it's a legacy hand.
Sorry.
Okay, and we're there. And you'll note in the chat, could any governor who does not want to receive a KGH iPad let Manisha or Richard May know by email or by phone if you don't want one. Otherwise, we'll assume you do. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I think that was a very helpful meeting. Thank you very much, and take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.